Hello, my name is John Ritchie. This is a presentation over automated essay evaluation. We'll take a look at the history, the current trends, and go over a pilot study that we did in spring of 2017 at Washburn Rural High School in Topeka. The study was funded in part by a grant from the K-State chapter of PDK. So my contact information is on there. I usually use my high school email more than anything else. Quick bit of my academic background. I have a BA and MA in English Literature from the University of Nebraska at Kearney. That was actually my first love, but while I was at Nebraska Kearney, I was starting to do things like work in the writing center and as a tutor, and that was what really pulled me into writing instruction. So instead of going right away for the PhD, I went back for a BS in secondary education through Kansas State University, certified in English and social studies. I am a two-time national board certified teacher, 19 years of teaching experience, 11 at Washburn Rural High School in Topeka. I've also done years at middle school. I have 11 years as a composition instructor, that is both as a dual credit instructor here at the high school and also as a Washburn University adjunct professor. I teach two of their writing classes, and I'm currently a PhD student at Kansas State University in the Curriculum and Instruction Department with a writing emphasis. My academic advisor is Dr. Todd Goodson. So a big question that comes up with automated essay evaluation is, why do we need to be concerned about this, and who should be concerned about this? This is geared more toward as a warning toward, well, English people more than anything else, but writing instructors especially. Worth noting that when I was doing a search for computer scored essays or something along those lines, I was looking in the traditional English writing journals that I use, things like the 4Cs journal or any one of the typical English writing journals, and I wasn't finding anything. And it was one of those things where I wasn't sure if I just didn't have the key word right. And ultimately, I stumbled upon the phrase automated essay evaluation, which sounds really dry and is probably not something that an English teacher would come up with, but it was ultimately a search term. And I found it very interesting that the majority of the research that I have within this presentation that I've seen ongoing is still primarily coming from computer journals or engineering journals. It's not as frequent in English writing journals, which I find rather alarming because this is going to happen whether we like it or not. So, driving factors behind the adoption of automated essay evaluation. One is the need for ongoing consistent data collection. There is that pressure from state departments of education. There's also that pressure from local district curriculum that we need that ongoing collection, that triangulation of data. And in the previous years, at the start of No Child Left Behind, for example, we do a state writing assessment, but then we'd have to pull all of our writing teachers out. We'd have to calibrate them, sometimes multiple times throughout the day. So realistically, it was difficult to justify pulling teachers, calibrating them, keeping them going multiple times every year. It takes a lot out of class time, and it's a lot of energy and effort. There's also increasing class sizes. When I first started here at Washburn Rural High School, my class sizes hovered around 20 to 21 students. 11 years later, my class sizes are hovering around 27 to 28 students. So if I assign an essay, I have to be prepared on average for 140 to 150 different essays coming in, giving them feedback, and trying to get them back to that. We have pressure from our administration. Our typical turnaround time is sometime within 2 weeks. So if you're looking at a substantial essay, I teach juniors and seniors, so something 3 to 4 pages, 150 or so students, that's a lot of scoring and feedback to give within just 2 weeks. Related to that, then, there's also teacher guilt. I feel awful every time I assign essays anymore because I don't always have as much time to devote to students as I wish that I could. So the argument here that I'm looking at is that it's going to happen regardless of what any English teacher desires. And I admit I looked at this very skeptically at first, but then I started to see the research and the possibilities. I've slowly become a convert. I hope that you'll be able to see why. My concern, though, is that this is happening without English teacher input. So I would like English teachers to embrace this as a useful instructional tool so that we can help improve them and help integrate them within our current classroom practice. It's basically the difference between adopting this ourselves or being told to adopt this by people who are not necessarily within our department. So a brief history. I started with Zupanc and Bosnick, and they note that in 1966, a former English teacher began development. His name was Page, and after roughly 7 years, he creates what he calls Project Essay Grade. So the most interesting thing to come out of Project Essay Grade was, as they note, the system's performance had more steady correlation with human graders than the performance of 2 trained human graders. And if you've ever been on a team of human graders who are trying to calibrate with one another, we might stay together for about 2 or 3 essays, and then our own biases tend to kick in, and the things that we look for in essay writing, and it's hard to keep that calibration consistent over a long period of time. But a computer could easily calibrate it itself with one score. Of course, when this came out, not surprisingly, it received only limited acceptance within the education community. At this point, it becomes just kind of one of those fringe things that's happening on the outside. However, suddenly in the late 1990s, with the internet boom and this increasing focus on standardized education, later pressure from No Child Left Behind, all of a sudden we have this explosion of automated essay evaluation systems in development. As of 2015, the authors note that there are at least 21 current automated essay evaluation systems, either in practice or in steady development. Not surprisingly, the early systems had some limitations to overcome. One of these is that they can only look at grammar and sentence structure. You treat grammar essentially as an algorithm, and you get a very dry system analysis. So there's no stylistic analysis, there's no recognition of voice, that's a stylish use of a fragment, for example. So if we're looking at English grammar in context, then the rules require suggestions rather than corrections. And of course, we all know that the best writers break these rules very well. So that's essentially a definition of style. In 2015, though, things become flawed, but still promising. There's one study that showed Chappell, Kodos, and Lee quote, or they note that there was a mismatch between the intended and the expressed meaning, and this led to reflections from students about functional meaning. And that led to this construction of a new discourse meaning. So they started thinking about where the automated essay evaluation system was telling them that the grammar was wrong, and where it was wrong and needed to be revised, but also then where it was wrong, but was fundamentally correct, at least from a reader's perspective. So if nothing else, these earlier systems started encouraging good discussions of grammar. Today, though, things are getting a lot more exciting. With the sophistication of computer programs, now we have feedback in addition to scoring. So it's not just a matter of a computer saying, this is wrong, this needs to be fixed, but it's actually giving full sentence feedback. This feedback can actually now be given with regard to style and voice. We have automated essay evaluation systems that are able to account for voice. Our district, USD 437 Topeka, uses Turnitin, which is probably best known for its anti-plagiarism software. Turnitin has what they call revision assistant. So this is intended to be part of a writing process, not necessarily a final assessment. Turnitin's ideal is that schools would use revision assistant as part of this process and then ultimately turn it in to the Turnitin program. I guess to address the elephant in the room, because I always squirm a little bit when I hear Turnitin, there is that issue of student intellectual property. I'm not denying that's a significant issue, but for the purpose of this study, it's enough to say it is an issue, it should be an ongoing discussion, but we'll move on from that. So we did a pilot study using Revision Assistant as a the automated essay evaluation instrument, and hopefully to see whether it would be an effective classroom tool for writing instruction and assessment. I typically use Turnitin as a discussion for plagiarism, but also for voice. So one of the things that I found with regard to Turnitin was Chow, Willem, and Neuwirth noted that students who do not receive plagiarism instruction from their current instructor, and I think from their current instructor is the key word here, key phrase, are twice as likely to plagiarize. So they need to be reminded by semester, do not plagiarize. It's bad, and this is how we avoid plagiarism. So Turnitin is an effective teaching tool as a plagiarism deterrent. Typically, when I work with Turnitin, we have that discussion about plagiarism, but then more than anything else, they have what they call the similarity index. That's the percentage that, rather than telling students, this is how much of your essay might be plagiarized, I frame it in terms of, this is how much of the essay I expect to see it in quotation marks. So typically I catch 1 or 2 students per year out of roughly 150 who have committed an act of plagiarism, but smart teaching practice, things like written outlines in class, written rough drafts in class, that's probably one of the best deterrents of plagiarism more than anything else. So when I talk about the similarity index, I typically talk about it in terms of this is how much of your voice is present. And if I see something like 42%, then that tells me that 58% is in the writer's voice and 42%, that's too much quoting. Revision Assistant, though, it is designed by Turnitin as a formative or writing process tool. It's a supplement to the summative assessment tools such as Feedback Studio. That is their grammar check, their peer mark, and their plagiarism similarity report. So how Revision Assistant works is you have prompts that are created by Turnitin. Teachers can still add their own requirements, additional text. Then the prompts have been fed through the automated essay evaluation system. They're calibrated through more than 500 student samples for each prompt. So by the time it appears in Revision Assistant, it's already been scored multiple times. It has that calibration there. The system analyzes patterns of writing and provides feedback aligned with the rubric that we'll see here in just a bit. They are designed to praise and to advise. This is also a first. The computer is actually able to praise the student and then provide advice for how to move forward. So our course context for this. This is administered to 4 ninth grade classes at Washburn Rural High School. We'll go over the assignment, the rubric, the Common Core standards alignment. Every single prompt in Revision Assistant has Common Core standard alignment. And it also, again, allows instructors to be able to add additional objectives or links to text. None were added here. So we'll take a look at 2 students, Zoe and Scott, and see what they did. The assignment was looking at censorship in the libraries. We tied this with an analysis of Fahrenheit 451. You'll notice that off to the side here, students can access the rubric at any time, an assignment PDF, signal check we'll talk about here in just a second, and then it gives tells us the genre and suggested length for the essay. It starts off with 2 quotes, with a quote, and then says write an argumentative essay to a newspaper reflecting your views on censorship in libraries. Do you believe that certain materials such as books, music, movies, magazines, etc. should be removed from shelves if they are found offensive? Support your position with convincing arguments from your own experience, observations, and or reading. The only other requirement that we actually did add to this was that students had to include a quote from Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. It comes with its own rubric, and you might notice the criteria here. We're looking at claims and focus, support and evidence. And then they have along the top Wi-Fi signals. They say that they don't want to assign numbers to this, but we found that our students right away said, okay, so this is a 4, this is a 3, this is a 2, and this is a 1. Well, we are also looking at organization and then language and style. Again, this is a computer evaluation instrument, so we're excited by the prospect of seeing language and style used within this. I won't go over all of these, but these two slides are essentially to show you that this is directly tied to specifying Common Core state standards. So Zoe, on her first draft, she started off with very much a rough outline. In conclusion, libraries should not be censored because, and notice it's telling her right away your main point is on whether offensive material should be removed. Remind readers how these supports or how these points support your argument. So it's specifically looking for a summary, a review of the main points, and it's telling her to go over that. By her second draft, every time the student submits their essay to Revision Assistant, it gives them Wi-Fi signals, and it will give them 1 point of feedback for each of these. So in this case, her supporting evidence feedback was, it would be more effective if you could bring in more specific information to support your claims. And she was already saying, I have 2 signals here in language, 1 across the board for the rest. Students, by the way, are able to submit as many drafts of their essay as they wish. They have 24/7 access to the software, so this really helps take this writing process beyond the classroom. We can start to see improvements. You notice Zoe's essay is getting much longer. We have a claim and focus response. This is her 6th draft. And finally, at her 8th and final draft, she has 4s across the board, and she was satisfied with that and stopped there. Scott, on his first draft, likewise, he gets feedback on language and style. His 3rd draft, and then he also stopped at 8 drafts, and he was satisfied at this point. So Brian Anderson, teacher at Washburn Rural High School, his immediate feedback was that he saw it as a valuable tool. The computer-generated feedback, he said, was generally aligned with the rubric. Kids responded well to the instant feedback. It motivated them to work on specific areas of the writing to raise their scores. He also added, he thought that they were motivated because they saw it as a sort of game. He says, I need to work on this so I can, well, the students were saying that they wanted to work on this so they could get all 4s or raise that to a 2, raise that 2 up to a 3. They were intuitive about how it worked. They picked it up pretty easily. He found that he actually needed more instruction than the student themselves did. Once students were given the programs, they immediately took to it. This is consistent with research. Not surprisingly, we're getting into that lovely buzzword of gamification. So Kim in 2015, for example, notes that gamification is a powerful tool due to its ability to capture people's attention, engage them in target activity, and even to influence their behavior. Students really started treating the writing process as a game to boost that score up. They're trying to get the best possible feedback and the highest possible score. Trespalacios, Chamberlain, and Gallagher further note the connection to 21st century skills. Video games in particular contain relevant advantages to be used in education settings where teachers promote cooperative learning environments. So I was thinking, for example, if I put peer review groups or students into a peer review group, then if they're placed in teams, suddenly it takes on a different approach because all of a sudden we're not just trying to improve our essay, we're also trying to get the highest team score. That's probably where I would head if I were to apply this in the classroom, just as an experiment to see what would happen in their approach to the writing process. Within a district, it gives us prompts within the 3 primary text structures: narrative, informative, and argumentative writing. They are aligned to 712 Common Core state standards. Last I checked, there were at least 15 to 20 for each grade band range. So this is something that as a district, grade level teams, PLCs could select prompts, say these are our prompts, this is the sophomore prompts, and so on, based on their curricular needs. These could also be turned into formative and then summative writing assessments. So we could separate these out as quick writes versus something more substantial. So the conclusion that I've reached through this and that I would like to explore further with my own PhD study is that we should be welcoming automated essay evaluation systems into our classrooms. They are going to encourage student revision, they will help save us time, and they are going to provide the ongoing data to help us improve our teaching. If nothing else, if we go back to that issue of teacher guilt, I was happy to see students getting immediate feedback whenever they wanted it, and I enjoyed the feedback that was being given to students. So I see this as a supplement to my teaching. I certainly do not see it as a replacement, and that's where I see the hostility of English teachers with regard to automated essay evaluation systems. If we embrace this, then this is going to be something that will supplement and help us, not something that's going to make our work that much harder. So my final thought, especially speaking to a group of teachers, if your colleagues were assisted by an automated essay evaluation system, and I don't mean this to be exclusively for English, but in terms of social studies, science, and math as well. If you were assisted by the automated essay evaluation system, would your colleagues be more likely to promote writing activities in their classrooms? If nothing else, I think this is the key question that we have to ask ourselves, because I think overwhelmingly the answer is going to have to be yes. If we have these systems in place, we'll get more buy-in from multiple disciplinary groups. The bibliography here is attached for further reading. Again, my contact information is on the first slide. I welcome any further questions, and I've also included a copy of the presentation. So thank you for your help, and thank you for listening.